Hey everybody, it's Brennan, and Patrick and I want to announce something very, very exciting before we get into today's episode. We would like to share with you Deadhead Review's very first Horror in Hollywood short story competition.
Patrick here. It is theme-based, the Horror in Hollywood. Horror stories set in and around the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Your story can take place at any period of Hollywood history, from the beginning days of silent black and white movies to the modern era of big Hollywood blockbusters. Be creative, cross-genre is welcome.
As far as the rules are concerned, we are looking for a maximum word count of 4,000 words, and we would like you to know that we are interested in standalone prose fiction stories. No TV, movie, play script treatments, or novel or novella extracts will be accepted.
Brennan and I will be on the panel of judges alongside Elle Turpett, Rich Gerlach, Cassie Daly, S.H. Cooper, and possibly more.
The contest is open starting on September 15th, and it's going to run all the way to September 30th. More contact information for that can be found on the Deadhead site, which I'll give in just a minute. As far as prizes go, there's a lot of good stuff in store, including promotional packages, editing services, and you could even be a guest on this very show that you're about to listen to.
For more information, go to deadheadreviews.com. Welcome to Dead Headspace. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and all other major platforms, which now includes Ghana, India's largest streaming commercial service. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello.
And today we're joined by a fellow podcaster, and some of you may not know this, a writer. He runs and he hosts the podcast, Does the Dog Die in This? Glenn Parker, how are you, sir?
Very good, thank you, guys.
Do you and Zach Ashford get mixed up by other people, or is it just me and Brennan that mix you two up?
I think it's just you two, but I did speak with Zach and Max Booth on Max's podcast, so maybe that kind of like set the tone for who's who. Like everyone might have thought we're the same people, but now we're definitely separated there. I'm the koala expert between the two, so just don't talk to me about koala testicles or STDs, and you're probably good to go. He seems knowledgeable on everything else, but yeah, just leave those matters to me.
Don't talk about STDs. Gotcha. I will note that.
That episode that you had, I think it was yours with Max Booth, was extremely informative relating to koalas. I had learned so much about those animals that I did not know before. So, yeah, I'll defer to you as the premier expert on koalas.
I'll take that crown.
Did you want to know any of that stuff, such as chlamydia-riddled koalas and so forth?
I already have no plans to go to Australia. It's far too scary for me. So, I mean, it's cool as a factoid, but yeah, even without, the furry, cuddly-looking bears being giant, sex-riddled death machines, I'm good.
Well, I think it's just so polarizing, so you have to tell people, because everyone just thinks they're cute and fluffy, and I don't know if you guys ever watch Blinky Bill, but everyone thinks they're all really cool, and it's well, actually, did you know this? And it's always just fun to watch people's jaws just drop and be like, what the fuck? So it's kind of cool to shatter that illusion, because they're oh, at least something's cute and cuddly in Australia, but even then, it is deadly.
What is that?
No, it's all bad.
Well, there's one really cute one. What is that? I think it starts with a Q. What's that one animal that looks like it's constantly smiling? It's like a furry little, I think it's a marsupial.
The quokka?
Yep, that's it. I saw a picture with Thor recently taking Quokka picture. Quokka. Did I say that? I said that wrong, didn't I? Quokka?
He took a quack pic.
What?
A quack pic.
Oh, yes. He took a quack pic. So, Glenn, segue into what got you into horror?
Yeah, we don't want to linger on those pics too long.
Nope.
All right, so basically for me, where it all began was, as you guys might have seen the other day, what I consider the greatest horror novel ever written turned 35, and that is It. I put up a post telling people why that book and the exact copy that I took a photo of was so important to me. Because when we were little, we moved around so much due to Dad's business. Like literally like once every 2 years we'd pack up and move to the next city or state. So I never really made many friends, and I really, really hated it. And all I really wanted was some pals. Like I know that sounds sad or whatever, but I just wanted some friends. And long story short, my grandfather passed away when I was 6 or so, and our grandmother came to live with us. And she quickly became my best friend. Like we had an amazing bond. It was just a really, really special thing to experience. And we would go around in every new town or state we moved to and explore their bookstores, thrift stores, libraries, all that kind of stuff. And she would buy Goosebumps and other books that I wasn't really allowed to read. So she would sneak them at the bottom of a library bag or handbag. And in return for watching Agatha Christie TV shows with her, she would give me the books that I wasn't supposed to have. So we had this little secret cult going on in a way. And by the way, I loved watching those things with her. There wasn't really any bribery there. It was just fun. But when we finally settled in town, she joined a bowls club. And one day they had this huge book club sale. And she comes home with this book by a new author. You've probably guessed what that book is by now. It was It. I was around 10 or so by now, and she thought I was ready for some bigger and scarier books. And without sounding lame, it was automatically special to me because it was the first adult book that my grandmother had ever gotten me. But that was also the last. She passed away over a month or so later, and it absolutely destroyed me. Like I just lost my best friend, and when I turned to It to read in her memory, I also happened by doing that to find my new best friends, which was the Losers Club. I can't explain what it was, but reading that book took me away long enough to have fun, to be amazed at how real and lived in that Derry felt, to be scared of something other than the idea of mortality, and how soon enough my parents would be in the same place my grandparents were, and how one day I would be there as well. So It showed me that terrible things can happen, but it's not the end of the world if you fight back. The writing was unlike anything I'd ever read. The scare factor was on steroids compared to Goosebumps, and it was the first book that ever took me someplace else while reading it. And it also makes me think of the best times that I ever had with the most important person in my life, and that was my grandmother. So that's kind of what started my love for it, was that my love for her. And it was crazy to experience, to be so shattered and so excited. Like it was this weird amalgamation of like finding something brand new and exciting, but also dealing with my first interaction with, mortality and losing someone close to me. Like the concept of death was basically a very foreign stranger at that point until it kind of, invaded my home and my headspace. So losing her and finding It at the same time was kind of like a crossroads that like shaped a lot of me, of who I am now and how I become the way I was and how I ended up loving horror. So it all ties back to my grandma. The further I involve myself in the scene, the closer I feel to her, in the sense that like, it's weird how she set me on this path, and I feel like once I get my writing out there and can call myself a writer, that I've almost completed that full circle of that connection with her. Like it'll just bring me that one step closer to almost sitting back and saying I did it like for what she would have wanted for me. Like all this stemmed from a woman in my life basically sneaking books into my room and letting me enjoy the things that I loved and supporting me to do that, because no matter what I did, my grandma supported me. Like I went through that goth punk emo stage. I used to have like every lip ring imaginable, eyebrow rings, nose rings, purple, green, yellow, blue hair, like multicolored hair, mohawks. I would wear all black. And even when my grandma got put into a nursing home, I'd go away with music. I was a traveling musician, and I'd made sure I'd be back every week to go visit my grandma, and I'd read her books. And I'd go into the nursing home, and all the old ladies would like look at me like, who's this guy? And like my grandma would be like so proud, like she'd like stand up in a lunchroom, like that's my grandson, like that's him. Like she didn't give a shit what I looked like. When else thought like I was her favorite person. And her last words when she passed, like on her deathbed, like literally. And I make sure my siblings remember this all the time. She whispered into my ear that I was her favorite person, and that absolutely blew me away. And that's something that I'll never forget. But no matter how extreme I went to be different or find myself, my grandma was always there, like clapping me on the back and encouraging me to make sure that I stayed true to the person I wanted to be. So, I've got her to thank for where I sit today.
That's a beautiful story, man. And I wish I could meet her. She sounds like such a cool lady, man.
That's such a cool answer. It's such an interesting answer. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up with you later on, although now seems kind of like a good time for it, you've talked about how kind of the grief side of horror is your big go-to. It's what you're very interested in reading and even very interested in writing. Would you say those two definitely tie together?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's
what?
Sorry,
go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that because that was such an emotional intro to me, and I think while I was reading it, I was kind of like happy and scared and sad at the same time. It was like a big mix of emotion. It kind of tied my love for the genre to that grief aspect, and like, because it's such a powerful emotion, like with losing, the closest woman in my life and finding something that I love at the same time. So I feel like that kind of heart that went into it merged my, kind of created my taste further down the track for what I want to write and for what I wanted to read. So it definitely all stems from the same place for sure.
So, I mean, with it being upwards of 1,100 pages, is that something you revisit fairly often or every once in a while?
Yeah, I've read it once or twice per year since I was probably 12 years old. Definitely an every year thing. Sometimes, most years, it's more than once.
Mm-hmm. I got to say, that's impressive as hell.
Yeah. Have you picked up anything the more you read it? Are you noticing more layers that you didn't notice before?
Well, that's what I love about it. There's so much happens. Like, I was actually talking to someone about it the other day, and they were like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, they hadn't read it. They're only come into the game late. And they're like, oh, there's so much random stuff he talks about at the start. I'm like, well, it's a 1,200-ish page book. Like, it's going to tie in at some point, but there has to be setting up of things that can come back later. Otherwise, it'd be a very, very boring story. So all those offshoots and all that stuff, when it comes back together, it's you definitely pick up something new every time. And I forget stuff too. Like, I'm probably the best kind of reader for rereading, because I'll read an entire book and I'll remember stuff, like the major points, but I'll forget it. Like, somebody will be like, oh, how about this? I'm like, what the fuck? Like, when did that happen? So like, I'll go back and read it again, and like, now that part will stand out and I'll forget something else. So I don't know if it's really a good thing for my memory, but I seem to be able to reread stuff as though I've never read it before, which could be good or bad, depending how you look.
There were 3 sections in it that I have not seen in either movie. They mentioned one in the remake that I wish that they did. The first one was the Black Club that got burnt down. That would have been interesting to show that. I would have been curious. They showed a little bit of it in the remake, but it was more like a backstory. The second one was a shootout. I think that was a mural on a brick wall in the alleyway. That was it. I mean, come on, you got guys that are literally, there's a bunch of gunmen shooting each other down, and you're seeing different people are seeing the clown. Like, let's see that. And then the third thing was there was since Derry was a lumberjack, I don't know what the proper term is, a lumberjack town, there was this one bar where lumberjackers would go, and this one guy comes in, just starts swinging his axe, kills someone, and I mean, like, why was that not in it? Like, that's this movie. Turn it up a notch. You got those 3 scenes right there.
Yeah, there's also a fourth thing that didn't make it. I noticed you didn't bring that up too. Yeah.
Are we thinking the children in the tunnel towards the end?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever going to see the light of day in an adaptation. Call me wild, but that's.
You'd hope not.
You'd hope not. You'd hope not. There's not really a tasteful way to do that.
I wish you never added that. There could have been so many other ways to go about that fucking mess. That's the only.
It's weird to segue into what I'm about to say from what we're talking about, but I feel like the neat thing about it, to my mind, is, maybe it's kind of a nostalgia thing, but I feel like there's not really a lot of superfluous stuff in there. Like, there's a ton of backstory. There's, you'll read like a 150-page scene that's just setting up something to happen later, and it seems like it seems like it could be extra, but I just feel like everything in there ties together. Everything is necessary, and it wouldn't be as special a book as it is if it was down even 100 pages, 150 pages.
Yeah, and it took him like 4 years to write it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. Like, it's, like I said, it's like when it's something that big, like you need to have all that kind of stuff, like he's basically, I'd say it is where the whole main dairy thing kind of really stuck, like come alive and became real, which then you obviously set up his multi-massive universe with all these books and everything. And I feel like that was the first, like, I mean, there was books prior to that set there, but I feel like that kind of was like set the tone that actually, like, without all that, like how many people like love the idea of dairy and the town itself, and like, all the landmarks in it are so like prolific and stuff, like everyone thinks about them. Like, if he doesn't set that stuff up, then, you don't get all that stuff. Like, that's what makes it feel like a real thing. That's what you feel like you escape to dairy while you're reading that book. Like, you feel like you live and breathe there, which is, I feel, is a major part of the whole King universe.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The dude brings life or breathes life into towns, whether it be Derry or Castle Rock, like no one else. You can certainly make the argument that he's not the only, horror writer that you should be reading right now. And I'd back that 100%. But there's a reason that, everybody's going out to pick up his books still.
So
yeah,
you guys,
that's the thing. Sorry, go. Yep.
Are you guys saying that Derry's like, that's the main part of all this? That's like the main attraction. It's like the main set-in stage of everything.
I just feel like when people think of like King, they think of Derry, Maine. Like, they think of like things happening in Maine. Like, I feel like, I don't know, it could just be my bias, but I feel like that was something that really stood out for me from, like, especially first getting into that stuff, but was that this place wasn't just like, oh yeah, it took place here and then things happen. It was like, you see the town, you explore the town, and then 11/22/63, without spoilers, when they go back there and there's that little scene where they're in Derry again, and you like, he talks about the town and how it is like it's still the same as when it was in it, and you kind of feel like, it's like the more things change, the more they stay the same, that whole type of thing. Like, it just seemed like you were going back to somewhere, not just like, oh cool, this took place in America where it took place. It's like, shit, we're back in the same town with the same characters, and like things have changed and things have moved, but they're still there. Like, you've got Richie and Beverly dancing in the park, and it's just like, it just feels like it's still alive. Like, it feels like an actual place. Like, it's easy to forget that it's not. It's actually, like, those landmarks exist because they are based in real things, but Derry itself's not a real place.
And that cameo, if you want to call it a cameo, could have felt so shoehorned in, but it didn't. It had this kind of touch of almost beauty to it. It really, I remember that really working for me, and I've read I've read 11/22/63 a few times, and that was a really cool part that didn't feel like it was just there to make people more interested in this newer book.
Yeah, no, I thought it was done amazing. Like, I think 11/22/63 is one of King's greatest books. Like, the writing in it is amazing, and like that little part in it, it's just something else that just adds to it, I guess. But that's just my opinion. No
question. I'll definitely back that. Even if you're not a fan of a lot of the newer novels, and what's that one, like 2011? I guess it's not that new, but that's a winner. That's a successful book. Even if most of what you enjoy by him is 70s, 80s, and whatnot. You mentioned that it is because of all the ties, to your personal life, that it is kind of your introduction, I guess, and, what got you into the grief side of horror. So I'm wondering, what are some other books that have really, I mean, it doesn't sound like there might be anything else that hit you quite as hard and stuck on quite as much, but what are some other books that you would put somewhere near that trajectory?
For me, it would be. I'm a huge coming of age fan. Like that is my all time favorite genre. So, Summer of Night, Boy's Life, like those two. Obviously, they're another huge scope type books. Like I don't know if you guys have read either of those, by McKemmon and Dan Simmons.
I've read Boy's Life and I have Summer of Night, but I haven't gotten around to it, and it's weird because I want to. I hear it's a good book. I'd like to eventually read it, but it's when he kind of came out and made it known that he was kind of a piece of crap. It just it fell down my list a little bit. I know I would probably enjoy it, but I'm a big believer in gearing myself towards books when I absolutely know for a fact the author is a good human being. And Glenn, I'm sure from experience, just diving into the Twitter scene, the podcast scene, the Instagram scene, that you get to know a lot of these writers, and they're just genuinely good people, and you want to buy their book all the more for that.
Yeah, definitely. I think with me too, I spoke about this on my episode with Laird Barron about how I have this thing when I really like something. I don't want to know what, like, it goes for music too. I don't want to know what the musicians look like. I don't want to know their names. I don't want to know what authors look like. I don't want to know anything about them, like, because I see it, like books and music like that, as like, emotions. I think like I'm highly drawn to like things like that, like the whole grief thing and all that kind of stuff. Like if it's really like powerful music and stuff, I think about it as emotions in the airwave. I don't think of it as like humans that have created it. As much as I like to promote obviously the people that do it, I can do that without knowing what they look like and whatnot. And that was a big thing with Dan Simmons. Like that's probably Summer of Night's the only book that and Boy's Life are the two books that have come the closest to it. And I think if you like it, you'll absolutely love Summer of Night. But again, I didn't know a great deal about Dan Simmons. I don't particularly care for him, having known that, but I wouldn't let what that gave me in my younger years and my childhood and stuff change the opinion on the book. Like I can separate him from that, knowing that he does suck, and I haven't brought anything of his since then, but it won't change the way I look at that book. But I just feel like, and same, I said this to Laird Barron, like I didn't know about, we discussed the eye patch and the hearing issues and stuff that Laird has, and that was something I didn't know until not long before the podcast, because I'd always avoided knowing what he looked like, because for some reason for me, when it becomes human, it kind of, I don't know, potentially, like, well, the exact reason what you said, there used to be this band that I absolutely loved, and I was a touring musician, we toured with them, and once I met them, they were kind of like assholes, and they weren't anywhere near as cool as like the music that they played. And it kind of like took a little bit away of the magic from the music. I didn't enjoy listening to them as much after that. So it was kind of a lesson for me to kind of just, they like they say, you never want to really meet your heroes, I suppose. And it was true to that extent in the music scene. So like for me, I kind of detach it. And same like Laurel, Hightowers, Crossroads. I know Laurel, I've talked to Laurel, and I still absolutely love those books. It doesn't lose the magic at all there. But I think that's because I knew her prior to reading it. So had I known Dan Simmons, like you haven't read it yet, you now have your opinion on him, and you're like, it definitely went down. So I feel like for me, because I experienced all this long before any of this happened, it's still got that magical place in in my favorites. But had I known prior, then it may have been different. Sorry, that went on a really long tangent there.
No. I can absolutely get behind that. And I mean, of course, the whole cliche of don't meet your heroes, it's only a cliche because it's got some truth behind it. And I don't know, maybe it sounds judgy, but I can see that being extra true with touring musicians as opposed to authors. I feel like authors, as a rule, of course, with plenty of exceptions, but I feel like a lot of authors are very humble. And, we've talked about in the past reasons that could be, maybe it's just because they have to get so used to rejection. But straying from the main point, like I said, I have Summer of Night. I hear good things about it. I don't care for the author, but I may pick it up and read it someday because I'm a sucker for that, doorstops coming of age novel that, it and Boy's Life shoehorns itself into.
Yeah, definitely, man.
I got one Dan Simmons book based off of the show because I saw Adam Neville talk about the show called The Terror.
Yeah.
It looks really good. I'm into history big time. I describe myself as a history junkie and a horror nut, and that's both of them. So, I mean, he's a dick, but Lovecraft seems like a fucking prick, and I love his stories. So, but he's dead. he's not making a cent off of me, so that's fine.
It's a weird line to walk. It really is.
Yeah. It's especially weird when you're a reviewer or a podcaster because when you see, and I'm just speaking in genuine terms, generalities, when you see certain authors or people that you like and they're like dicks, if you're so close to something, you don't want to be a part of it. Like, I can only imagine, for example, Harvey Weinstein. A lot of people were connected to him. Kevin Smith was a guy that got his start with Harvey Weinstein, and he's like, I would have never worked with him had I known. You never know. So let's move on to something lighter.
I would say, I would just add piggyback on that there, and I would say that we will never have H.P. Lovecraft on this show. Not interested in that.
So Glenn, your first episode posted April 13th of 2020. Our first 6, because we launched with 6, started, that was May 27th, 2020. Our shows are parallel in a few ways, in the fact that we started pretty much a month apart, and we've had a few crossovers of guests. In particular, one that you and I were mentioned on that I specifically wanted to bring up. When I first heard about you, I've heard of your show, Does the Dog Die in This? And, you hear about so many things and you're just like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. But nothing clicked until I heard you and me compared to each other on This Is Horror, which is fucking cool because, since the horror show's no longer, there's one horror podcast that reigns supreme in my eyes, and that's This Is Horror. And Josh Mallerman and Michael David Wilson were talking how you and I are pretty much in the same boat. You and I came out of, in their words, we came out of nowhere. We both have very fun shows, and we both had Josh on. So I guess this is my weird, long-winded way of saying, how'd your show start? When did you know you wanted to do it? What are the steps you took to do it? And this is a loaded question, so I'll reiterate any of it. And the last thing was Michael David Wilson specifically said to me, you are a hardware guy. You are very, this is my words, prideful in the equipment you use. Sounds like you're meticulous to get a good product. So take all those long answers, any questions any way you want.
So easy, man. Well, I know I wanted to do it probably 3 or 4 weeks before it happened. It's something, I always talked about, one day I'll do a podcast, and I'm very all in. I'm all or nothing with everything I do. And basically the start of the year, this is kind of a 2-part thing. The start of the year, I decided I wanted to write a novel. I've always loved reading, and I've always imagined – it's part of the reason I wanted to talk to the authors too. I've always imagined what it would be like to just hold something that you've written in your hand, and not only that, then have people read it and love it. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to be a writer, so I'm going to go all in as I always do and just get obsessed with it. And it's just what's going to happen. I'm going to have a novel soon. I'm going to have short stories, and it's going to work. And how's it going to work? Well, let me have a look. I looked at what everyone was doing, how authors were trying to get out there, and how you basically were, 300 million people in a stadium all holding up signs trying to get people to look at your specific sign. And I was like, okay, that's a very, very hard task. That's, I can see why that would be a struggle. And I was like, look, how else? I have a background in business and finance and marketing. And I was like, how else can I do this? If I do want to have a product out there, that's one has to be great before it comes out. That's well and good. But how do you get people to read it, and how do you get people to know who you are? And I looked at Bookstagram for ages, and this seems like a really cool way to build a platform. Everybody here seems amazing. The community seems awesome. I'm a huge book collector and horror nerd. So let's go that route. Let's jump on and talk about books, and slowly, if I do start writing, bring the writing out through there. And, I connected with a lot of people, and I was well received very quick with my, obviously being an Australian, but I took a different review of doing I really utilized Instagram TV for my video reviews, and being an Aussie that's a bit vulgar and whatever, I was just myself, and people kind of connected with that, and it kind of grew from there. And I started talking to authors and stuff, and I was like, it'd be really cool to, talk to these authors properly and have a podcast and that kind of stuff. And it all just steamrolled from the Bookstagram platform. And one day I was talking to Keelan Patrick Burke, and he was he read a short story that I wrote for my mum when her dog died, and we just got chatting. And then I was like, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. What's the chances of getting you on there? And he had a good point. He's like, no offense. He's like, I like talking to you. You're a good guy and all. He's like, I'm just a little bit burnt out on podcasts. Not that there's anything wrong with them. They're amazing. They're really cool to be on, but it can get a bit. He's like, you can just get a bit burnt out on it. And I was like, yeah, no, that makes total sense. If I was, and like you said, we have we have a lot of crossover with guests and stuff, and we have similar tastes and similar questions, so you can see why. Anyway, I went and thought about it, and I went back to him a day later, and I was like, okay, what about if I paid you to write a short story, and you wrote a short story exclusively for my podcast listeners, and then you come on and have a chat, and after the episode airs, we release your short story, and we go from there. And obviously then it became business. So that's what they do. They're writers, they write for a living. So it changes the mentality. And then I started thinking fuck, what if I did this with all authors? What if I did this, and this? And then, the bushfires were happening down here. So I had this idea to then have a lot of the authors that come on, I would commission them to write a short story. They would write that short story. I would have a blog where that short story would air after their episode. And at the end of every year, we would compile all those short stories together and have an anthology related to the podcast, and do a limited signed deluxe edition, and would only sell, 100 of them each year or something. And then it just literally all just started to steamroll from there. And we decided to do the first one as a charity thing. It's funny, this is when the fires were happening in Australia. That was kind of the worst thing. Now that seems like it was forever ago, and not even important, even the grand scope of everything that's happened. But I started a GoFundMe to adopt koalas, and in the first 2 weeks, I think we raised nearly $3,000, and we adopted 15 or 16 koalas, and I adopted them in the authors' names and sent out the authors the care packages that we got, and named the koalas after them and whatnot, and it kind of just all rolled from there. And now basically what you see is what you get with the show, and that's how it all kind of started.
Brennan?
Yes. Oh, you got nothing? No.
I thought you should go first.
I knew. That's really interesting. I knew the whole thing where you had them write stories, and the kind of impetus, I guess, of the stories was that they had to involve a dog, and it was up to the author whether the dog lives or dies. So, I mean, is that all kind of based on the story that Keelan read for you?
No, that was just coincidence. I just literally never written before. Long story short, my mum's dog died while she was away. She couldn't be there. We had to be there. I all of a sudden got this urge to just sit down and write this story, and I wrote it, and it just was received really well, and it kind of just rolled from there. But I think whenever I pick up a horror novel or watch a horror movie, and as soon as there's a dog or something in it, I'm like, fuck. Like, is a dog or horse or cat or fucking turtle, gerbil, whatever the fuck this animal is it going to die in this? And if it does, am I going to hate the author or am I going to hate the movie? So I was originally going to write a short story called Does the Dog Die in This? No, it was going to be called The Dog Does Not Die in This. And it was going to be like, almost think like Planet of the Apes, but with dogs. Like, the whole world was going to die, but dogs were the only things that survived. And dogs just like ruled the world. And I just never did it. And then when it came time to do the podcast, I was like, that's kind of a cool name for a podcast, like The Dog Does Not Die in This, because it seems to be a very thing in horror that people kind of like shit. Like, you know, I don't know if people have read The Troop, and I won't get into it, but there's shit in that when people are like, oh my God, like the turtle, the cat, like, and I was the same. I was like, fuck this book, even though I really liked it. So I was talking to Aaron Dries, and he's like, I was going to call the podcast The Dog Does Not Die in This, and that was going to be the story. There had to be a dog, and it couldn't die. Everybody else could die. Then Aaron Dries was like, you know, it's probably a little bit more controversial or opens up more conversation and stuff if it does the dog die in this. Then you can kind of explore like the humanity in horror and, you know, the boundaries that people will and won't cross. And it just opens up a broader conversation. So then it switched to that. And yeah, then the rules changed to you can have a dog and you have to have a dog and it can live or die. It doesn't have to be a main character or anything, but, you know, it's up to you whether you kill it. So then at the end of the year, we're going to kind of have team the dog dies and team the dog does not die. So it's just a bit of fun.
Dries is a smart man.
He is. He's hilarious as well.
Yep.
I think if the horror community has like two qualities in common, it's empathy and the fact that we would all rather see the dog survive than the human main character.
Big time. On that,
absolutely.
Real quick, Aaron and I have a really exciting announcement for next month. I can't say anything yet, but I thought I'd just drop that out here that you guys will have the first buzz of it, I suppose. But we are announcing something super exciting for next month's event, the Hellbound Halloween. So that'd be really, really cool. Just while we're talking about Aaron, I just thought I'd bring that up because I can't wait to drop that on everyone.
You heard it first here, a vague exclusive.
A vague exclusive. Well, while you're bringing that up, tell us a little bit more about the Hellbound Halloween, because it looks like you have a ton of shit going on for that.
Yeah, man. It's something I did last year. Again, I grew up in Australia and we're basically robbed of Halloween. We didn't have Halloween. I did a video on this the other day talking about why I love the idea of Halloween and how Bookstagram has enabled me to experience that as an adult, because the joy of being an adult is that you can do whatever the fuck you want within reason. And I want to celebrate Halloween, which I never got. So I told a story about how I was a kid, and one year I decided I don't give a shit what anyone says. I'm going to have Halloween. Tough titties. It's going to be an Australian thing. And I got to dress up as a sheet. I didn't even get to go as a ghost. I had to go as a sheet because I wasn't allowed to cut eye holes in the sheet. So basically I ran around my house blind as fuck for like half an hour knocking over shit before I got a smack of my ass and Halloween was over. And the year after, I saved up all my money, all my pocket money. I was mowing lawns, picking up dog shit, doing whatever I could. And I brought like this cool devil outfit. And I was like, I'm going trick-or-treating. It's going to be magical. And I made it as far as my next door neighbor's porch when he literally come out and told me to get the fuck off his front steps. And I gave up on Halloween again. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to go buy my own candy. Fuck Halloween. I hate it. And ever since then, Halloween lived in my head. And when I joined Bookstagram, I made friends with so many Americans and so many international people that celebrated it. So I was like, fuck this. I'm having Halloween. I'm going to live through you guys. We're going to have Halloween together. And I floated the idea of the Hellbound Halloween. It wasn't as adventurous as this year. We read Dead Leaves by Keelan Patrick Burke. We had a pumpkin carving competition. We dressed up and, you know, we had, you know, the best costume award and that kind of stuff. And there's about 40 people or so that joined. And the cool thing was at the start, I was like, I've never had Halloween. I don't know any of you guys. Everybody's welcome to join. And a lot of people joined that kind of floated around but didn't really interact or didn't know where to start and made these like really good friends. And like the feedback at the end was like, wow, like I was kind of shy and nervous here and I've come into the group and everyone's welcomed me and like now I've made friends that I talk to all day, every day. And I was like, well, let's make this a yearly thing, and kind of grew from there. And this year I knew that I wanted to go all out, and obviously made a lot more connections through the podcast and through what I'm doing here. So it enabled me to go bigger and better with that as well. And so far we've got 110 people signed up to join, so it's going to be a really fun month.
Where can people join, and people that want to join that want to see a text written out version, you can find it in the episode notes, but where can people join that?
So there's going to be a Discord. So one of the things last year, what the problem is that we had to have like 4 different group chats because Instagram only allows 32 people per chat. So it's going to be on Discord, and I was going to put a video up on how like people can join the Discord and everything. But long story short, for people that don't know, we're doing a Halloween season and scary stories to tell in the dark read along, where we have a big group chat for that. There's going to be a signed Stephen King giveaway. I can't say what book it is yet, but it's going to be really, really cool. We're doing a trick or treat international snack exchange where we kind of team up for those that want to get involved. We team up, in pairs and send each other our favorite snacks to get there in time for Halloween.
Oh, I call Laurel. I want those barbecue chips again.
There's pumpkin carving, costume competition, so there's parties for that. We do an online horror movie party where we'll watch something cool. There's exclusive short stories from Andrew Cole, and we're going to get some live readings from Alan Baxter, Jonathan Jans, Aaron Dries. I'm actually going to release my first official horror short story too, which is going to be exclusive short story for this event as well, which will be my first actual writing thing released into the horror world. So that's going to be super cool. And the idea was that slowly, starting next year, I've got a bigger idea to each year I'm going to write a collection of short stories and release that for the Hellbound Halloween as, a part of the read along. And it's only done yearly for that. So we'll have the Hellbound Halloween 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. And I'll just write a collection of short stories every year and get other authors involved as well. And we'll have we'll release our own reading for the month, which will be really fun.
That's a really cool idea, man.
Yeah. When you said there's going to be a story, an exclusive story by Andy Cull, and you left it at that, I really thought you were going to gloss over the exclusive story by Glenn Parker. Now, I'll understand if you say no, but is there anything you can tell us about that story? Is it all under wraps?
About Andrew's?
No, about yours.
Oh, yeah, man. It's something that I've thought about for a while that I really wanted to do. It's called All Hallows Grieve. Obviously, there's that grief aspect to it straight away in the name. But without going too far into it, it's about a young kid who hates Halloween because he's born on Halloween and nobody ever comes to his birthday party and wants to go trick-or-treating. So, it kind of opens with the line, like, not only was it cruel enough that Timothy Greaves was born on Halloween, it would also come to pass that he would die on Halloween. And it's about this kid who goes to his school to petition to change the date of Halloween because his town, he lives in this like magical town. Think Neil Gaiman style. He lives in this magical town. It's the town that winter called home is basically what it's called. And Halloween's their huge thing. And he goes to school with this letter that he's been working on for ages to try and change the celebrations a week forward because he's getting old now and he wants to have one good birthday party. Halloween's going to be there forever. His childhood isn't. So he wants to make a change. So he goes and proposes this letter that he's been working on. And as you can imagine, it doesn't go over too well. And the kids decide they want to get back at him for trying to change or ruin Halloween. But none of them knew just how far that would go to make sure that Halloween is saved. That's about all I'll say on that.
Glenn, I hear a lot of authors complain about writing back cover copy, but honestly, it sounds like you could, that could be your niche. So is that opening line, is that paraphrase or is that the exact opening line?
I think I'll look at it right now if you got 2 seconds.
Or, is it like super close?
It's pretty close, yeah. It's basically a paraphrase, yeah.
So that's a really cool opening line. Is that something? Is that like? Just hearing it, I imagine that was the first thing that basically came, like maybe even before the title. Is that the way you operate, or did you just kind of work to craft a really cool opening line?
No, that just came. Like I knew that was the thing. Like there was basically a line that come up with right at the very start when I first thought of this story. This line come into my head that, again, it was a paraphrasing, but it was something like, monsters are a product of humanity. We've created something worse than ourselves just so we can live with the things we do. And the whole idea was that like humans do such terrible things to each other in the pursuit of what they want. So like our blind pursuit of the things we want and need will make us, abandon other people or hurt other people. And the whole idea is that like we came up with monsters just so we could sleep at night because, vampires, werewolves, there's things worse than us out there. So what I did wasn't even that terrible. So that's where it kind of started, was the idea that like monsters are a product of humanity. Like we created that. So it was kind of the idea that these kids and this town, like especially being kids, they're a lot more inclined to put their wants and needs in front of someone else. So it was like, how far would we go to just make sure that things don't change in a small town and we get to keep doing what we want to do. So it's kind of like, that's where it all stemmed from, I suppose. And when I sat down to write that line about, he was born on Halloween, that was the first thing that came, because I'm a hardcore pantser. I fly by the seat of my pants. So I just sat down and I was like, all right, what am I actually going to write about? And then I just started typing and that's what came.
So you said that's a short story?
Yeah, it's probably novelette, I suppose. It's going to be around 10 to 15,000 words.
I'm just trying to think, how the hell do you fit that in 7,500 words? Because I think that's the cutoff for short stories. That sounds like such a great story. I want to read it. And Greaves, is that for like ironic reasons that his last name is Greaves?
Well, yeah, I think without being spoilers, his name, if you put the title together, his name was originally supposed to be Timmy Hallows. And when I started writing, I accidentally wrote Timmy Greaves. And I'm like, well, that sounds kind of cool. But the title was All Hallows Grieve, because obviously that the kid dies on Halloween. I tell you that straight away. So it was kind of be like All Hallows Grieve, like his family and everyone related to him is going to grieve over this. So it's just like a play on words. I was just kind of like I listened to a lot of hip hop. So I guess it was like a word play thing on, like he's a Hallow. So when he dies, his whole entire family is going to feel it.
Interesting. I have a question back to your podcast. Are you breaking it down into seasons? Are you just going straight through? Do you have a setup in mind, or are you just kind of pantsing it?
Man, I'm a hardcore winger. Like everything is just, I knew I was going to talk to Josh a day before I spoke to him. And the whole idea, my whole thing for the show is that it's completely organic, freestyle conversation. I don't write questions. I don't write it. Like before I sit down to talk to them, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. I don't even think about it. So it's just all on the fly. That's kind of how I do things. I don't know whether it works or not, but so I have no idea about seasons or anything. It's basically just going to be, here's the podcast. We talked about whatever the fuck came up.
Fair enough. How'd you get in touch with Josh initially?
How did I get in touch with Josh? I have a really good friend on Instagram who's one of the first people I made friends with. Her name's Leanne. Her username's GrumpleStiltskin. I decided I was going to do the podcast. I spoke to Aaron, Keelan Petrovberg, all those guys, and they were like, "Oh, cool, I can do it this month, that month." So I was like, "Awesome, these are all like the lineups." And then she sent me an email one day with this giant list of authors that she'd contacted for me and told them the pitch of the podcast and said, "Hey Josh, my friend's on a podcast. This is what he wants to do. This is a short story idea. Blah 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 blah. Would you be interested in having a chat?" And there was like, a yes from Josh, a yes from this person, yes from that person. And it was like this huge list, which is basically everyone that I've spoken to. And I was like blown away because I didn't even think, like she just did it and was like, "Hey, here's a list." So I messaged Josh on Twitter and I was like, "Hey Josh, my friend so-and-so said you're interested in having a chat. Like, are you still up for that? When do you want to do it?" And he's like, "Yeah, totally, man. Like, call me now." And I called him. And I'd never spoken to anyone before, and I called Josh, and I was like, "Hey man, what's up?" And we just started chatting, and we clicked, man. And he was like, "Fuck," he's like, "We got to stop talking." He's like, "We need to do this tomorrow. We need to record it." He's like, "Because we were both getting really excited talking about shit." We spoke for like 20 minutes or something just on the phone, and he's like, "All right. We need to save this for tomorrow." So we jumped off the phone, and then the next day I set everything up, called him on Skype, and the rest is history.
I love talking to him, man. He's just one of the most laid back, coolest guys that I think we've talked to.
Yeah, definitely. So Glenn, a lot of your episodes, you opt to split them in half. With you just kind of deciding shit on the fly, what was the deciding factor on you kind of operating that way?
Well, I figured nobody, like, you see 3 hours, 3.5 hours, you're like, oh, fuck, I'm not listening to that. Like, so I feel like, you know, it's almost like putting listeners on a diet. If I break in half, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. I can eat this and then eat that next week. So it's kind of like, you know, if you see the small portions of it, it's easier to digest. So an hour when you're commuting, you know, or half an hour in the morning while you're on the walk, and half an hour when you're driving home from work, whatever. But 3 hours just seemed like, you know, like this is not an insult to newer readers, but hand like a newer reader that started reading horror in the last couple of years that hasn't read any of the classics, something the size of It or The Stand, after they're so used to reading, you know, 200, 300-page horror novels, they're going to be like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, this is daunting. And they might absolutely love it, but they're just like, whoa. So, you know, I feel like if you break it down, it just seems it's, you know, it's not as bad. Like, because I'm the same. If I saw a 3.5 hour episode, I didn't care who I was listening to. I'd be like, holy shit, when am I ever going to sit still for 3.5 hours?
I was close to breaking down one of the first 6 episodes, Jim McLeod. We talked for 2 hours. He's the first guest I recorded an episode with. But then I just said to myself, fuck it. If someone wants to listen to this, they will.
Yeah, no. Our editor doesn't split episodes. Too lazy.
Well, if we talk to someone for over 3 hours, I would.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, well, Josh and I got to the point where, man, I was literally about to piss my pants because I was too afraid to say I had to go to the toilet, because this is my first ever podcast. I didn't know the protocols, and I'm talking to Josh Mallerman of all people, and I'm sitting here like trying to fucking tie my dick in a knot so I don't piss my pants. And then Josh comes back in after having a smoke, I think. Oh, he's doing something, and he's like, holy fuck, man. He's like, we've been talking for 3.5 hours. And then it was just kind of like, it was a segue into like, all right, cool, let's get out of here. Like, this has been awesome, but fucking we're going to be here all night otherwise. And man, sorry, go. Yeah.
The key with Josh going to the bathroom was you got to write down the time.
Josh pees at 10:25 Eastern Standard Time, which would be, I think that would be around noon your time.
Because I totally learned that, because like it was 3.5 hour episode, and I'm like, shit, I know we had breaks somewhere. I'm like, fuck, now I've got to sit here and listen to 3.5 hours of this conversation to try and find the 2 minutes where I'm like, all right, man, I've got to go piss. So I've got a notepad with me all the time now, and I like, all right, cut this time or that time. And that was a very valuable lesson.
When I was recording an episode with Armand Rosamalia, I drank coffee. It really doesn't matter what time. Like, we're talking now, I finished my coffee like a half an hour ago, and it's almost 10 at night or in the morning. But when me and Armand were talking, in my head the whole time, I'm like, all right, we're reaching an hour 10. I'm about to piss my fucking pants. So that was before we recorded video, and I just said, I'll piss in this cup that I got, and I'll wash it real good after. Because I didn't want to miss anything, and I didn't want to be like, hey, Armand, you talk a lot like Kevin Smith. Can you just pause there? Like, you're not going to interrupt the guy's flow.
Definitely not, man.
So I had to create my own flow simultaneously as he had his flow.
I was wondering if you were trying to turn that into a pun.
I wasn't, then you laughed, and I was like, hey, that could be funny.
So did you piss in it?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. See, I don't know if you listen to the Aaron Dryers podcast after the Josh Mallerman episode, actually talk about.
I did. You guys, that's where I first started.
Yeah, I tried to get the flowers out of the vase. There's a vase on the desk, and like I didn't realize the flowers were glued down to it. And I was like sitting there for like, which I'm glad, again, not on video, because I'm sitting there for like 5 minutes trying to pull these flowers out, because I was like, I needed to go so bad, and I was so overwhelmed with everything that was happening. I was like, I didn't think that they were glued in, so I was like, what the fuck, when these flowers come out? And it was just a whole disaster, man. So at least I'm glad you got to do it.
I didn't tell my wife, because I'm pretty sure that, like anyone else listening, will say, you're a fucking gross human.
No, man, gotta be done. Gotta be done. We've all done worse than that.
I mean, the alternative is in your pants in the chair. You know, if you just run that coffee cup through the dishwasher a couple extra times, and you're fine.
Yeah. So I guess as far as your show goes, I had another question. Was what are your expectations for them? And Has the podcast changed anything for you? Has it opened doors? You kind of answered that, but fuck it. I'll just ask it again. Has it?
I think definitely, man. Like as I think you were saying Michael David Wilson said to you, is that I'm like a stickler for like details, or like, you know, I take pride in that kind of stuff. Like I knew that I had to have an amazing logo. I don't know if people listening have seen the logo, but I'm quite fond of the logo for the podcast.
Who made it?
Sorry?
Who made it?
One of my good friends, Gus, who also did the Hellbound Halloween poster. I don't know if you've seen that, but he's doing a lot of my book covers and interior art and stuff as well.
Plug him. What's his handle?
He's not. He's not too keen on it. He likes to just do it on his own, like in his own time and when he wants. So one of the things was that he didn't want me to go out and be like, hey, this is the guy that did it. Everyone talk to him. So he's a really cool, humble dude. So yeah, but so that and the intro as well. Like I'm like, I need to have a good intro. I need to have everything. So in terms of expectations of it, I just want to keep growing. I want to dethrone Michael David Wilson on This Is Horror.
Let's do it together.
Gauntlet is thrown down.
No, let's
He
do it.
listens to this sometimes.
No, let's do it together. Let's do it together. You, me, and Brennan. Let's dethrone him and Bob.
He knows that I'm coming for him. In a good way though. Like we get along really well. We have a lot of banter. We chat a lot outside of it all, and he's been a really, really big help. And it was
not that friendly.
Sorry?
He's not that friendly.
No, but I think that's why we get along, because we're both just insulting each other 24/7. So, but no, he's a really good dude, and yes. I think in terms of, well, I mean, had I not started the podcast, I would never have gotten positive feedback from Laird Barron about my writing. Like he read the, I don't want to go too much into like this part because you know it was obviously personal, but after Laird and I ended our conversation on air, we spoke for another 45 minutes to an hour and actually got pretty deep on some things, and we kind of it was really, really cool. We shared I won't go into it, but anyway, it led to me talking about the story that I wrote for my mum because it was similar to what we're talking about. Anyway, he's like wanted to read it, so I shot it over to him, and he come back a couple of days later and told me that I did a mighty fine job, and that it's there that I should write. So like, I mean, that would have never happened if it wasn't for the podcast. And like Laird's he'd be up there in my ultimate, like, you know, favorite writers and like a guest that I really, really wanted on the podcast. Like I hold Laird very highly up. Same with everyone that I've spoken to, but you know, to get that feedback from someone, to have access to that, it definitely opened up that aspect. Not that I think it would, you know, like it's nothing will come from it, but it's just that advice and that feedback definitely I would have never received without, you know, going all in.
Yeah, well, that's meaningful feedback. And he doesn't strike me as the type of person who's going to say it empty. You know, if that needs work, he's going to tell you it needs work. But if he tells you got it, I'd take that to the bank. Well,
that was the conversation too. He's like, you know, I will. He said that he's one of those people that will say, look, it's hard to say because he talked about some stuff that, you know, whatever, I can't repeat and I won't repeat, but he said that he is one of those people that be like, look, you know, it's kind of there, but you need to do this, this, and this. And like, don't get me wrong, he didn't come back saying I'm the greatest writer ever. He just said, like, you know, you've done a mighty fine job. Like, this is good. And it was just really, there wasn't like it wasn't bad, but you got to do this, this, or this. It was just like, you know, this was really cool. Like, keep going. So like that, you know, that'd be akin to Malaman or Tremblay or someone reading it and being like, dude, this is fucking awesome. Like, you know, it's one thing to have your friends and family read it, and as you guys who write both know that, you know, they're just like, yeah, wow, this is the best thing I've ever read. But to have people you respect read it and say, yep, dude, this is fucking cool. Well, then, you know, that's invaluable things that I've gotten from the podcast. So it's cool to be able to, you know, put those conversations out there, but at the same time also talk to authors that I respect and get feedback from them about, like, you know, my own work and what I'm doing. So, and it's also opened up the doors with what Aaron and I are doing next month. So yeah, I feel like I wanted to be up there, you know, with this is horror in terms of quality and that kind of stuff. That's what I'm aiming for. And then I also wanted to make my own contacts. So there's no secret that it's a good way to network, and it's only going to help when I come out later as well. So I feel like all of it together, it's just been a really positive experience.
So that's another exclusive on this show that Glenn Parker wants to dethrone Michael David Wilson and Bob Pastorella.
That's it. He knows it too. I don't know if I can though. I reckon he's a bit of a cyborg or something. Like, have you guys ever watched him on video? I give him shit for this all the time, but I reckon he blinks like once per hour. So I don't even know if Michael David Wilson is real. Has anyone ever met Michael David Wilson?
I've seen pictures. I know he's in Japan. Air quotes.
They could be photoshopped.
Exactly. It could be CGI. There is like those deep fakes and stuff. Like, I'm putting that out there too. Like, Michael, are you even real?
Well, I mean, like, do you think that he's Bob because they're both bald?
Yeah, maybe. It's like some Scooby-Doo shit.
Imagine if you are going to go for the king, though. I mean, you got to – we all know that Laurel Hightower is going to take down Bob Pastorella at some point. There's some sort of prize fight scheduled. Yeah. So you just got to team up with her, and then at least you only have to deal with one of them.
Plus, you'll get bourbon after.
It's true. Well, she does constantly carry a supply of bourbon.
I'll save that, guy. I'll save that for you guys. I've never been drunk in my life, so bourbon is not going to work for me.
Oh, wait. Let's talk about that. Have you ever drank in your life?
I've tried. I've tried a sip of beer and some other stuff. I've probably collectively over 32 years maybe had one full drink. So straight edge, as much as I don't like the term, but don't drink, don't smoke, don't do drugs, never have. Don't know if I ever will because, well, you never know, especially the way this year's going. But so far,
if you made it to September, Glenn, I hate to doom us by what could possibly come in October, but if you've made it this far, I think you're good.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good. Unless 2020, this is just like a warm up to 2021, then, who knows?
Well, what's funny is as far as podcasting goes, basically my wife was like, this is really all I want for Christmas is the hardware, research it. This is the mic, boom, stand, blah, blah, blah. It's all the hardware I want. And it wasn't too much, it was affordable. And when I got it, she's like, well, it's a good thing I bought the microphone now because they're all sold out. Like, everything's sold out that you wanted. And she got it in time. And she goes, so this was before the pandemic came out. Wait, no, I'm sorry. She didn't get it for Christmas. She got a little bit after, around the beginning of the pandemic, and she just basically said, I think it's connected. I think there's a lot of new podcasts coming out. Did you have, because like in the horror community, I've noticed that there's been quite a few too, like in the last 2 years as well. There's kind of a boom coming out, and I like it. Maybe I'm just new and it's always been this way, but there's a lot of choices. For, be it film, books, other things just in horror. Do you happen to have any that you are a particular fan of?
With podcasts, like I said about splitting episodes up, I don't have a great deal of time, like with what I do in my personal life for work and everything. So I want to listen to a lot, but the main ones I find myself listening to is Last Podcast on the Left. I know that's not really, it's horror related in the sense, but like that was my first ever podcast. I got an iPhone and I do like powerlifting. I was a competitive powerlifter, and you spend a lot of time at competitions and stuff, like downtime, kind of like waiting around for like different lifts and whatnot. So I started getting into podcasts, and yeah, so Last Podcast on the Left, Inkheist, This is Horror. They're probably up until recently like my staples, and now I'm starting to add, like, obviously until 2-3 weeks ago, we weren't acquainted with each other, so you guys are in the rotation now as well. And that's kind of where it sits for me, like, because otherwise it just gets too, you feel bad because you haven't listened to this one, but you're listening to this. So I'm pretty like narrow with my podcast, and I know there is a lot out there, and it's the same as books really. At the end of the day, you have to choose the books that you like this. How long are they to be read? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, is podcast going to get the same? So I'll listen to everything like here and there, but they're my main staples. If I've got an hour spare, it'll be one of those.
I'm right there with you with the podcast to be read, pal. I got so many that I barely listen to most of them now. I asked for recommendations on Twitter, and boy, that was a good and bad idea. Good because there's a lot of interesting ones. Bad because there's too many.
Yes.
And this is how we catapult. Oh, sorry, Gunn. Go ahead.
Oh, quickly, I was just going to say, I think like audio production is a big thing for me, like the sound and the presentation and stuff. And I feel like, yes, it is a flooded market, but I don't feel like everyone necessarily takes it as serious as the ones that I enjoy listening to do. And that's not a slight on them, because obviously not everyone has the budget or the time, and some people just want to get together and record on their phone with their friends and have fun. Mm-hmm. But I find myself less inclined to enjoy those because I just like really well presented audio. Like I just love, it's hard when I first started with my episode with Josh. Like that was a quick thing I learned. Like I did it through Bluetooth into Skype through my phone into my mixer, and it came back pretty like muddy, and it drives me nuts. Like I'll send Michael David Wilson snippets of podcasts. I'm like, oh man, should I just delete this whole episode? Does it sound like shit? He's like, no, dude, it's completely fine. I'm like, you sure? Should I call the author back and like be like, hey, we're gonna do another one? So like that's me. So like if it's there, I find like those guys have the most well presented show with the audio and stuff. Like they take it that little bit more serious. So I think that may be a draw for me. So yeah, like the market is definitely saturated, and it's an awesome thing that it's horror thriving and so popular. And that's what I mean when I named those few. It wasn't to knock on anyone else. It's just they're the ones that I find myself drawn to the most, I suppose.
Yeah, it's fair. Catapulting, Brennan.
Oh, I was just going to make a bad joke about how we are going to catapult ourselves to the top by talking about on our podcast how there are too many podcasts. That's how you do it. You point out the fact that you're, expendable.
That's it. Well, I mean, it's the same with writing. Like, there's just we're honored. I mean, not honored. We're blessed to have so much choice, and that's the thing. Like, one thing that I learned early on with business, and it stuck with me forever, is that there is always room. Doesn't matter what anyone says. Like, you see on a lot of self-defeating posts on Twitter and Instagram and like the horror writing groups. Like, there's a certain type of author that's like, oh, I'm not going to bother trying to market this because there's so many. The competition sucks. Like, I'll never get anywhere. There's too many people. Like, I see that quite often. Obviously, there's the other ones too that just go all out for it. But I feel like the one thing I learned very early on is that like there is always room. Like, there's 9 billion plus people in the world. Like, there is a market for everything. It doesn't matter if there's 5 million of you doing it. Like, if you do it right and do it, like, work at it, there's no reason why you can't find a home with what you do.
Yeah,
especially if Laird Barron is willing to blurb your book.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So speaking of, Glenn, I want to hear a little bit about your, God, it's going to sound cheesy, but about your writing journey. Because I don't know why, but I kind of assumed it was a newer thing, but it kind of sounds like it's something that's been going on for quite some time.
It's been about 10, 12 months, close to a year, I suppose. So, I mean, it's new in the sense that I'm 32, so it's like, what, 1% of my life or something. Yeah, so basically, long story short, I loved, like, the love I got from it. I couldn't imagine, like, being the type of person that sits there and writes something that will give another reader or another child that same experience in life. Like, I wanted to give back what I got from it. So the first novel, I guess I just sat down and decided I want to write this novel. I actually had this dream. I'm sure it happens to a lot of authors. Like, that's where most of my ideas come from. Like, I have crazy dreams and I decided, all right, this is going to be a story. And I just had this dream one night about these 2 brothers that dig something up in their secret. They've got this secret kind of like play spot where they go. They all sneak in there and it's like their own personal little playground, and they dig something up there, and what they dig up could potentially change the world. And it comes down to like the test of brotherhood and loyalty when, things get divided between what they find being able to affect one of the others. It comes down to choice between, would you kill your brother to save the world, or would you watch the world end to save your brother? And it kind of just started spiraling out, and I decided I was going to write it, and it ended up being like a love letter to the coming of age genre. Like it was influenced by, there's definitely like Stand By Me vibes, there's Goonies vibes, there's It vibes. Like it's I just started writing, just started coming. I just kept going with it. And then, eventually there was 100 and something plus thousand words written, and there was a first draft, and yeah, it just kind of spiraled from there. And I just decided that that's what I wanted to do. So there's no rhyme or reason really. I love reading, so I'm like, why not give back to that, I suppose.
I like that. I like that idea of not, there's not a lot of people that we would talk to or you would talk to that would say, yeah, I started typing up a book because I wanted to get rich and famous. That's not why we do it, but the idea to give back, and also the idea to try and create something that could potentially be as affecting to a new reader, or even, an experienced old reader, as some of your favorite books have been to you, something that could reach in and touch somebody. That's really cool. And, I've heard people say that coming of age is kind of overdone right now, but I think that there's so much room in that, whether you call it a subgenre, a trope, or anything like that. It's not like vampires. It's not like werewolves. It's almost like horror itself, where you can kind of take that genre and you can mix it with just about anything. It doesn't, when you write coming of age, there's just so few concrete things that you have to do. There's so much room for, everybody to play on that playground and do different and unique and interesting things. And I would love to read that story when you get it out there.
Yeah.
Thanks. I didn't do that blurb justice as I did the first time around. As I was talking about, I was like, shit, how do I actually say what this is about? And I failed miserably with that. It's definitely better than I just made it sound. But I learned early on too that to write what you want to read, and even if the market is overdone or saturated, like that's fine. Like I'm writing this because it's something that I would want to read. Like this is literally my love letter to the genre. This is what I want to put out there, and obviously there's a million other stories that I want to write, but this was just again, even if it is overdone, it's what I want to hold in my hand. Like I wrote this. This is like, if I'm writing this for anyone, it's like I said, it's me. It's for me. It's to pay homage to the things that shaped me growing up.
Yeah.
Isn't that,
and Pat, go ahead.
Isn't that how it should be? I mean, that's how I view it. I heard Sid Haig in an interview years ago saying, he's like, I do this for me first, and then the fans. And I always said to myself after I heard that, yeah, that makes sense. Like, why the hell would you do this for anyone else but yourself?
Yeah, and that's basically, I have a really strange writing technique too, in the sense that, I mean, that's not a technique, but talking on my process, like there's 3 people that read probably what I write every day. As in, like, say if I write 2 chapters, I'm like, all right, what do you think of this? Like, they'll read it, and like they're not friends. I mean, they've become friends, but it's not like friends or family. One's an editor, one's a fairly well-known reviewer, and one of them's just a really, really heavy reader of the genre. And I actually write, like, they read the entire novel, as I wrote it daily. Wow. And same with this short story, the Halloween story. Like they wait for the updates every day and like love reading it, and they'll talk about this character and that character. And it's a really cool way for me, because like I'm getting to like see their reaction and like have fun with it and like play around with ideas. And it's something that's so fun. Like we've bonded over that, and like literally like we've laughed and cried, and like to have them come back and be like, man, I had to like go like sit down for like 5 minutes and like cry after reading like this chapter or that chapter, or this made me laugh so much. Like when I was at work, I thought about it and it made me laugh, like because Dustin did this and it was so cool. Like so it's been a really cool experience for me too, to like it's weird to get like I get that gratification or validation from like having them read it and like they enjoy it too. So like it's probably a very weird way to write, but there's a handful of people that like literally read it daily as I write it, and it just seems to be like a cool little group that we've got going on. So that was something else that I've got out of this that, like you said, you write it for yourself and these other people that enjoy it as much as I do. It's just a really fun thing. So yes, like it's definitely me first, before I worry about the other stuff.
Yeah, and that's not to confuse when I say that. That's not to confuse you. Don't write books for people or audience. Like there's plenty of authors or actors that say, or filmmakers that are like, we did this for the fans, but I feel like at least when you start out, it should be for you. Otherwise, why are you going to stick around? But hey, that's just my thoughts. People can have different opinions on it. Glenn, what are you reading right now?
Currently reading. What have I just started? I'm rereading Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones. I am reading Halloween Season by Lucy A. Snyder, which is.
Ooh, can we talk about that real quick? Because Brennan showed me that cover, and wow, that's Halloween.
I have not picked that one up yet, but I'm hoping to get to it pretty soon.
Yeah, man, I love it. Like I'll be the first to say I'm not a huge fan of short story collections. It's just I started on it, so I was like, I'm drawn to Doorstoppers. I love, if I see a book that's like 1,000 pages, I'm like, fuck yeah, like let's read it. If I see one that's 200 pages, I'm like, what can happen in 200 pages? Obviously a lot. My mindset has changed on that. Lucy's collection, Halloween Season, that's one of the books we're reading for the Hellbound Halloween. I read it in like one night. Like it was some of the most fun and amazing short stories, and the prose in it is just amazing. Like everything about it is so cool, and it just gives you that like real Halloween vibe. And a lot of it is like kids trick or treating and that kind of stuff. So if it's not out yet, but I would definitely put that on everyone's October to be read list. Like if I could suggest a book right now, it would. If I could suggest a couple of books right now, it'd be Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. Halloween Season by Lucy A. Snyder, and one that I always suggest to everyone is Remains by Andy Cole. That's another one.
Sure, yeah.
I think that Andy Cole's Remains, I told Laurel this, and I think she agreed, or liked the idea. She probably just laughed, putting words in her mouth. But Andy Cole's Remains, Laurel Hightower's Crossroads, I think that they're brother and sisters. They're those two creepy twins from The Shining, holding hands. They are just so similar, not in story-wise, but tone-wise. They're both so powerful, and they're so short.
Yeah. I always thought of Remains. I think I read that a little over a year ago. I always thought of that as the best book that I'll never read again. It's so powerful, and I feel like I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It ripped my heart out, and I don't think I could go through it again.
All I'm going to say is being a father, thinking of certain things in that book, putting myself in the shoes of the mom. I'm not going to say what I do because I don't want to ruin or insinuate anything, but it makes you think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, hopefully hearing you guys like that, I hope that you like what I'm writing then, because that's the kind of threads that I'm trying to weave there. Like that's the impact that I'm going for, similar in that vein to that type of horror. That's kind of where I'm trying to land, really.
I'm really excited to read that, Glenn. I am definitely looking forward to that, and not just saying that because we have you on the line and we feel obligated. No, that sounds really cool, man. I'm looking forward to that.
Whereas me, I'm like, no, I'm only kidding. I would like to read that, and I think it's fair to say we want to read it and then get you on to talk about it sometime.
Absolutely.
Definitely, man.
I find it funny that you said you're not into short stories, but you want to put together an anthology of short stories yearly.
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing. It's in terms of the podcast and the Hellbound Halloween thing, like it's seasonal. Like, I enjoy, when I say I don't enjoy short stories, like I like them. I just don't necessarily, with anthologies, when I first started reading, you might get so into a story and it's like, 30 pages or whatever, and then it stops and then jumps into the next one, and the feel and the vibe is completely different, and it kind of like breaks the immersion a little bit because like, you just settled into something you love, and then it's a polarizing shift to something else that's, you know, a different author, different prose. Like, I just always found myself wishing that, you know, this story was expanded on a little bit more or whatnot. So I've come to enjoy them a lot more. And obviously, when it comes to, like, you know, putting together the anthology, it's, again, like, I'm reading those short stories and I'm involved in it, getting them off the authors, like, when their episode airs and that kind of stuff. Like, it's different when, you know, you're hands-on with it as well. And I guess it's tailored to stuff that I like, you know, with having the dog in it and that kind of thing. So it's a bit more relatable and personable with me. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. Do you guys ever experience that? Like, you read a short story, same, like, you know, by Andrew Cole, like Bones. There's I don't know if you guys have read that, but there's a short story about a kid whose dad owns like a funeral house, like a funeral parlor, and basically all this kind of creepy stuff happens in there, and it was like really, really cool. And I was like, wow, this story was just amazing. And then the next one was completely different. And then again, I found myself wanting to go back to the feel of that last story. So I don't know whether other people experience that or not. It could just be me, but yeah, that's where I stand with it.
I have mixed feelings on collections, and I can't bring myself to read like more than one story. I'll hear people, and you said you did it with Halloween season, who sit down and read a collection or an anthology like over the course of 1 or 2 days, and I feel like I have to just do one story a day. And, you know, maybe it has something to do with that world immersion that I want to kind of experience that story and then just let it sit for a while. But, you know, I thought it was interesting when you expanded on why it is that you know, don't love short fiction as much as you do longer form stuff. That actually really answers that question for why you would want to kind of put together an anthology or whatever, really nicely, because you have that ability to curate and almost make sure that there's a theme that kind of pervades the whole thing and, you know, runs in a linear fashion throughout. Basically kind of make your best attempt to nip that problem, or at least, you know, one of the main reasons that you would prefer longer form stuff to short form stuff and collections. Nip that in the bud.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Halloween season was one that I could read in a row because it was all, you knew every story was about Halloween. So, you know, if it's something like Bones where it's tackles like grief and different monsters, and it has the ability, they were all amazing too, but you just had a really good point about reading them one a day, which would have been 10 times better. So when you know, like, every story is based on Halloween, it's, you know, it's got that vibe that you want at that moment with what I'm reading. So I think I'm more educated on the sense of it now. Like, I used to think, you know, what could you achieve in a short story? And I've definitely been shown what you can achieve with all these amazing authors out there. So I'm more around to it now. It's just not the first thing I would pick up if I had a choice.
Yeah, definitely.
Makes sense.
I was going to say the only problem with reading that one a day is if I have to get something done by a certain date, or if I'm, you know, reading something by a person we're going to talk to, I have to start it like 2 months before to plan that out.
Brenny, what are you reading right now?
I just wrapped up The Halloween Store by Ronald Kelly, which is either out now or about to come out, probably within the next few days. I know that was a September release. And I'm about to finish up. He also is putting out the Essential Six stuff, which is
the 29th.
Yeah, it's the 29th. I'm trying to think how many stories are in there, but it's just kind of over the top. Some of it is gross out stories, but, you know, it's definitely sick stuff. The title tells you what you're going to get. And I am also reading The Body Will Follow by Rob E. Boley. So I guess I'm on a Silver Shamrock kick right now, and I didn't even realize it.
That looks really good.
Yeah, it's a good kick to be on.
Pat, how about you?
I'm just reading the Essential Six stuff because that's a big fucking book.
It is a big book. I don't know how many stories there were in it, but it was definitely, I'm pretty sure it was around 20 or north of that.
Yeah. Where can people follow you, Glenn?
Instagram's probably my main hangout, which is the Hellbound _heart. I am on Twitter as well. I'm just trying to figure Twitter out. I'm brand new to it, and it's very confusing. But I am on there as, I think it's just Glenn Parker 88, and then does the dog _die for the show. That's pretty much it. I'm not on. I mean, I am on Facebook, but who uses Facebook?
Fair enough.
Nobody uses Facebook. Fuck Facebook.
And the podcast you can find everywhere that good podcasts stream, I suppose. So your Spotify, your Google Podcasts, your Apple, I don't know, everywhere. Basically everywhere I can get it, it is. So it's on most platforms, and if it's not, shoot me a message and I'll get it on there. So I think I covered most bases with it, and that's just Does the Dog Die in This? That's the podcast name there.
We appreciate your time, man, as always. And for anyone listening to this, you can still enter. You will have 1 week as when this airs, you will have 1 week and 2 days, actually, to enter at deadheadreviews.com for our short story. The ad, if you want to hear it again to get all the details, just go back to the beginning of this episode. Thank you, Glenn, for joining us. Brennan, thank you for being my co-host as always. And listeners, appreciate you taking your time, day, morning, or night, to listen to us and bring us wherever you were going. Have a good day, everyone.
We are in your mind. We are all around. You are now leaving Dead Headspace.
Well, does it sound all right on your end with me?
Yep.
You have a bit of an accent.
Yeah. That's for that one. We are allowed to swear though, right?
Well, if you listen to our fucking show, Glenn, you'd know that plenty of people curse on
I
it.
was like, maybe somebody complained, because like when I first started doing, yeah, well, that was more to do with my Instagram videos, but like there's a big running dare that I couldn't do one without swearing, so I had to do a whole video review without swearing, and it was very interesting.